state from Kansas.
I'm from Bartlesville,
Yeah.
far northeast Oklahoma,
Yeah.
and there's a little valley up there, and as long as I can remember, this valley has been known as Nigger Gap.
Oh, I know where you're talking
And
about.
I asked Grandpa, I said, you know, why the name? And he said there was a Cherokee by the name of McClintock or something like that.
McClendon.
McClendon. Slaves were coming up, and he was hiding them in his house in this valley, and they going up into Kansas territory, escaped. And it was part of the Underground Railroad.
Well, see, McClendon. Now, that's the same man I was talking about who came out of Kansas, out of the legislature.
No, is this McCabe?
McCabe, I mean.
No,
I'm talking about
yeah,
McCabe. You're talking about McClendon.
Yeah, this
Well,
was
these are two
Cherokee,
different.
and his foundation is still there, and there was a big basement underneath it, and he hid the slaves while they were escaping up, and it's part of the Underground Railroad.
Well, isn't that where they supposedly had this mystery light that also hung around?
Yeah, that's up on...
That's between Oklahoma and Kansas.
Yeah, it's up in Miami.
Okay. They had a strip through there where this mystery. I actually saw it on television. My daddy viewed it visually. I saw it on television early. And I actually saw the light. Some cameraman happened to catch it when it was bouncing here, and it actually shot like a meteor, and some 50 yards.
What kind of light?
A light?
It's just a spook light. That's what they call it. Interviewed Robert Whiteberg, who's a full-blood Pawpaw Indian, lives in Pawpaw, Oklahoma, and I used to come by their house.
The light.
The light.
And it would just go like
That
that.
reminds me of Spook Hill down in Florida.
Oh, really?
You can turn off your motor and your car will go uphill.
Well,
Uphill. You've heard of it, haven't you?
now I
And
haven't.
I actually experienced that one.
I didn't. I haven't. Where?
Down in Florida. What part of Florida? It's out of Lakeland, somewhere in around Lakeland.
Some kind of extra energy or something.
You put your car in neutral and it'll actually go uphill.
Well, that's a mystery to me just as much as that light is. I've never heard of it.
It's like a continental divide, you know. You drop of water and half will go one way, half the other.
Who told you that?
That's true.
I crossed
That's
the Continental
true.
Divide, and they told me some tricks to pull. They said, well, you do the Continental Divide. I tried to cross the Continental Divide at 38th parallel. And they said that you drop some water here. And
Half will go one way, half
well, I
the
didn't
other.
see it, so it could have. It was,
You gotta have faith.
It was a. He's original. He can make a whole movie out of Dr. Cooke. He's original.
You better get started for
Oh.
He's sitting around listening.
They have a funeral going on.
Yeah, that's Richard Ball.
Yeah. And
It wasn't in the paper till last night.
Yeah.
I'd already committed myself to come here, so I came on over here.
Well, that's why I came.
I want to remember Richard as I knew him.
Mm-hmm.
He's a great guy.
Yes, he was.
Sir, what's your full name?
Francis Wardell Cooke, with an I and an E. C-O-O-K-E. That's not on my birth certificate either.
Today is December 22nd, 1988. My name is Joe Todd, and this is an interview with Dr. Francis W. Cooke in Guthrie, Oklahoma. Yes, sir, do you live in Guthrie?
No. I live in Bethany, Oklahoma.
Yeah.
That's my home address. But I practice in Guthrie.
Sir, where were you born?
Wichita, Kansas.
And when's your birthday?
3/25/22.
3/25.
Finally told the truth.
Who's your father?
Andrew Cooke.
And your mother?
Maiden name, her name was Ninie, N-I-N-A.
And maiden name?
Woodard.
Woodard? W-O-O-D-A-R-D?
Right.
And your parents were from where?
My mother was from Oklahoma. Ida Bell Beggs. That's what she was raised. And father was from Tyler, Texas.
Tyler, Texas. What type of work did father do?
Well, he worked at Cudahy Packing Company for 47 years, but he also was a bootlegger at night.
In
in Wichita.
Wichita. When did your parents move to Kansas?
1913.
1930. Why did they move to Kansas?
Well, my mother, her whole family, her friends, sisters and brothers, they came off some type of Indian reservation down in Oklahoma, and they, as each one left the reservation, they were given 160 acres of land. And when they would come out of the land office, there was a fellow sitting out there that bought the land from some type of something, I don't know what, and they decided the best place to go would be Kansas. They thought their life would be better.
Why were they selling the land?
Why what?
Why were they selling their land?
Get some money.
Get some money. So this was the allotment?
Some type of allotment,
Yeah,
as
right.
I understand it.
Yeah, they allotted the land estate to all the Indians.
Right.
And each one, I think, got 160 acres.
Right.
Okay.
That's what story she told me.
And what's the name of the packing company again?
Cudahy. Cudahay.
You know your grandparents?
I only knew my grandmother. Her name was Lizzie. She had married about 4 times, I believe.
Now, is this your maternal?
That's my maternal. I didn't know any of my grandparents on my father's side.
And was she the Indian?
She was Indian.
And what was her last name?
Curtis,
Curtis.
at that time.
Know where her maiden name was?
No, I'd have to look on that sheet.
Where did you start the school?
Where?
Yes, sir.
Wichita, Kansas,
What, just public schools?
public schools.
Were the schools in Wichita segregated at that time?
They were segregated up to the 8th grade. Then in the 9th grade, you went to integrated schools, 9th through high school.
Any reason why they were segregated up to the 8th grade?
I think they were neighborhood schools, more or less.
And as a small boy, what chores did you do around the house?
Everything Mom told me to do. We used to have to cut wood. We had wood burning stoves, and we didn't have money to buy coal. We had wood burning stoves. We'd cook and heat with wood. We had outdoor toilets at the time.
Would you give me a description of the house you lived in those years?
Well, we moved there, rent there probably. But the one I remember the most is at 1012 Indiana in Wichita. And it was fairly comfortable, about 5 rooms, 3 bedrooms. They had the bathrooms facilities on the back porch, enclosed. But it was a water toilet type. You would remember this type, but you sit down on it and the water would run. When you get up out of it, the water would stop.
Not big, but- Where'd you cut wood?
Well, I had a lot of wooded areas around Wichita then because it was more or less a sort of a rural type of area. And we'd just go out in the woods and cut some trees down and cut the wood.
How'd you cut the wood?
Axe,
Thanks.
saw.
How many cords could you cut in one day?
I didn't know what a cord was.
You just cut wood?
I just cut wood.
And how big was Wichita in those years?
I imagine maybe about 20,000. That was prior to the aircraft industry. You know, I'm one of 10 kids. I'm not a only child. So I had plenty of help. I knew how to beat the rap and pay my brothers to do my part of the work.
How'd you pay your brothers?
I worked at the drugstore and went to high school. I got $3 a week. Give them about 3 cents, and they'd do all my work for me.
What was the name of the drugstore?
Purcell, Purcell, right at the corner of 9th and Cleveland in Wichita.
And was that the name that the man owned?
Right. And during the noon hour, I would shine shoes. That was in high school. I'd shine shoes across from high school during the noon hour and make some money.
In high school, what missions did you get into?
Everything I could. I had the God-given instinct to be able to get my lessons. So I'd get by with a lot of things because I was always prepared with my lessons at school. And I would pull those things I shouldn't. But luckily, since I didn't give the teachers any problem in the classroom, I'd get by with a lot of things.
What did you do at Halloween?
Go out and turn over outdoor toilets. I never shall forget. We turned over a man's toilet one night on the north side of town. He came out there with a shotgun. This was about 10 blocks from our house. And he just shot up in the air, and boy, I tell you, we took off. I never ran so long in all my life. That was we would turn over toilets, and we would put porch swings on top of people's houses. That's when most had out porch swings.
How did you celebrate Christmas in those years?
About like we do now, I guess. We didn't ever get what we wanted, but we got about 50% of the things that we needed, like shoes and shirts. And my mother used to go to Salvation Army and buy shirts for 5 cents. Because with 10 kids and neither one of your parents being educated, you had to make it some way.
What did you want for Christmas?
At what age? Just name one thing I really wanted.
Yeah.
I joined the Boy Scouts one year, and I wanted to get an axe, one of those hatchets. And the hatchet those days was $6.95, and that was just like $100 these days. And I worked hard doing extra chores, and bought this hatchet, and paid that $6.95. I carried it home, had a little cover on it, and my mother had a fit because I had spent that much money for a hatchet. The only thing I remember about I did with that hatchet, one Thanksgiving we had a goose, and I chopped the goose head off with the hatchet. I remember that vividly. But she was really upset. And as I look back on it, that was a very foolish thing to do, but it was one of those things that I really wanted and I worked for.
Mm-hmm. Besides the goose, what did you raise around the house?
My mother always had a little garden. She'd raised tomatoes and lettuce. I don't remember any potatoes, but mostly tomatoes and lettuce and onions, things of that nature.
In schools, did you study Black history?
No. The only time Black history only come incidentally, and we had Black teachers in the elementary school, and there was one teacher that made a habit of always teaching us some Black history, but it was never an accepted program in the school curriculum.
Any idea why it wasn't accepted?
I guess that was just a custom. We didn't have any pass.
What do you remember this teacher teaching you about the Blacks?
I remember such people as Christopher Adams. He was the first person killed at Bunker Hill to start the American Revolution. I think I remember that. We used to know a lot of poets like Paul Laurence Dunbar, Langston Hughes, and people of that nature. We also discovered that the guy that discovered the North Pole, I think it was Matthew Perry. Well, Henson actually was the guy that was the first there at the North Pole that Perry got credit for. Those are the type of things we used to keep hid under the cover.
And you graduated from school
East High, 1940 in May.
What did you do after high school?
Well, I was a pretty good athlete in high school, and I wanted to go to college, so my high school coach thought a lot of me, and he, a white coach of course, he brought me down to Langston to see Segregation about a scholarship. And at that time, Langston had the pick of the litter. They could always pick the top grade athlete, and I was a journeyman type. I was one of those guys you could depend on to get maybe 2 or 3 yards as a running back, or played a pretty good cornerback. I don't know what they called in those days. So he brought me down here, and Zip Gale said, well, I got a lot of guys with 178 pounds that's much better than you are. So Coach came back to Wichita, and he knew a friend out in California at Stanford University. And he called him, and he told me that he told the coach he would take me, but I would have to keep up a 3-point grade point average regardless, else I couldn't keep my scholarship. And he was only doing it as a friend. So that's how I ended up out of Stanford University in California.
Let me back up. Did your family do any work with the CCC program or WWII in the 30s?
No. My mother worked as a maid in private home, day work, she used to call it. She used to get $1 a day in car fare. Car fare was 7 cents. And my dad worked at a packing company. He usually would make maybe $70 to $75 a week. I remember that vividly because every Friday my mother used to go out to the packing house at 12 noon on Friday to pick up his check. He'd always meet her with it and just give it to her. On Saturday he'd come to her and ask for 50 cents. She'd ask him what he wanted to do with it. And she wouldn't give it to him. And that made an impression on me. I said, now when I get married, if I work hard enough to make my own money, I'm gonna not have to ask my wife for anything. So that's the way it is today.
How did the Depression affect you and your family?
I remember the Depression because we didn't have sufficient clothing. In the summertime, we were happy because it would be warm enough for not to have to wear shoes, but that pavement would be so doggone hot. That tar paper used to burn our feet. And I remember vividly that tennis shoes were 49 cents. And somehow or another I scrounged around and doing an odd job, and I got 50 cents and bought a pair of tennis shoes so my feet wouldn't burn up in the summertime. In the wintertime, a lot of times our shoes would wear out. We'd take cardboard and put inside the shoes to keep the weather out.
Was there much trouble? Of course, Wichita was above.
Mason Dixon.
Yeah, that Jim Crow law and all that. Was there any effect of Jim Crow in Wichita at all?
Well, as a kid, I didn't run into too much of it because I always stayed around my neighborhood. Except we had a little baseball team called the Wichita Wildcat. And we played baseball. We had a league in which you played against the white teams and so forth. And the only thing I can remember vividly about Jim Crow is I would hate to see the circus and carnival come to town, because when they would come to town, there was always trouble between the blacks and the white. Someone would always do something that caused a lot of problems with racial overtones.
Wow.
So I stayed away from the carnival. I used to go out and work 3 or 4 hours at the circus and helping them put it up to get a free ticket to go in. I remember that too. But as far as just having Guthrie is worse today than Wichita was then. Which one?
World War II. No, 39, 40.
Yes, I was a member of it in World War II. I went in service September 42.
Did you think that we'd get involved when you were in high school?
Well, I can remember when we stayed out a long time, but we were sending aid to England to help carry on the war. So it wasn't until Pearl Harbor that we actually were involved.
What would you do between 1940 graduation and the time you joined the Army?
Well, see, I finished in May 40, May and 40, and in September 40 when I went to college.
Did you have any trouble with the white kid in Wichita?
I don't remember any. They used to have our neighborhood, and we had more trouble with the west side and east side black gangs. Like, we had a gang on the east side of town. There was a gang on the west side. And, you know, we wanted to show our superiority, and we would meet and fight it out. We put our best man against their best man, and things of that nature. But it wasn't real vicious. It was just to claim territory. Who was the best? Why I like to live on the west side? Why I like to live on the east side?
Which side do you live on?
East side.
East side. So you went to Wichita East?
Wichita East.
Wichita East, okay. Did your playmates, were they all black? Did you have any white playmates?
All black.
All black.
I can remember.
Okay.
Except somewhere about the 3rd or 4th grade, we moved to Wellington, Kansas. And at that time, when I attended the 4th grade, then in Wellington, the elementary schools were mixed. I went there a year, and they was the usual kid rivalry, but no real problems. They used to make fun of my clothes because my feet would be bare in March, and I remember 2 guys that's still living today, and I found one of them about 5 years ago. One name was Andrew Hatfield, and he was a freckle-faced, red hat guy, and the other name was Ninie Woodard. Now, Andrew Hatfield's folks were poor like mine, but Ninie Woodard's folks owned the Glayman Oil Company in Wellington, so he wore the best clothes and all that. So Ninie used to make fun of our clothes, Andrew and I, so that's what drew Andrew and I together. And then in school, we used to have a rivalry, which Andrew said, well, we can't buy what he buys. Let's just beat him reading the books. And that's what we did. We were always 1-2. And we formed a close relationship. Now, I found Andrew Hatfield about 5 years ago, and he worked in the Cessna aircraft after they came in during the war. He retired from there, but that's all he ever did. He finished high school, still in Wichita. And he's still a close friend.
Where were you in Pearl Harbor Day?
Pearl Harbor Day, as I recall, was on a Sunday afternoon, and I was out in the yard playing basketball when the news came over around noon about the Japanese attacking Pearl Harbor.
What was your reaction?
Not too much, just
Did you
like,
know what Pearl Harbor was?
yeah. I was pretty well versed in most all that stuff.
Geography.
In fact, being in college then, the only difference between the white kids and myself is if we talked about the Leaning Tower of Pisa, well, I could describe it from the books and they had been there. So that made a little difference.
I got my question. I was going to ask, why is Guthrie worse today than Wichita was back then?
Well, you can go in some of the stores now, and like Coast to Coast when it used to be here. Well, maybe it's still here. There's those Tasco beside. And when you walk in, well, somebody will be following you up and down the aisles and watching closely. And asking you a question if you have a pretty nice clothes, you know, clean and tied and so forth. Then they start asking you questions. What do you do? Are you a teacher? Are you a preacher? And so they start questioning me that way. And I said, do you want to sell me something, or do you want to interrogate me? And whichever one you want, well, that's what I'll do. So that stopped. And pretty soon everybody knew who I was because I was crazy.
So you didn't have that trouble in Wichita?
No, never. As I can remember, I never had any, I'm not saying that things didn't occur, but it didn't occur to me.
You mentioned about not getting off the train one time.
Yes.
Because you saw the black and white balance.
Right.
Where was it?
Amarillo, Texas. I'll never forget it. We were on a troop train, and I had just left school in California, and I was on active duty, and they were transferring me to North Carolina, Camp Sutton, North Carolina. And I had never been south before, except Guthrie, and then be too much then. And I hadn't seen these signs. I looked out the train window and Amarillo, I saw these black and white signs. I was afraid to get off the train. And I didn't get off.
What did you study at Stanford?
Pre-med.
Pre-med. Any experiences at Stanford that you'd like to relate?
I had no problem except I played football, ran track, played baseball. And some of the other teams, the players would call your names. So I would say, well, I'm going to come right over your direction. I'd ask for the ball, and that's the direction I'd run. 50% of the time, well, I got them, but 50% of the time, they got me too. So it was pretty good. They got till they knew who I was.
Why did you want to be a doctor?
I didn't want to be a doctor. See, when I finished high school, I was 15. And I wanted to get married. I had my girl all picked out and everything. And so I took a civil service exam, and I passed it. Then I was too young to get a job. So my neighbor, my friend, he and I were raised up together. His name was Cleve Ewell. I have his picture at the office now. He said, your dad and my dad worked together, and says, I'm going to be a doctor. I said, well, there's 14 kids in your family, and there's 10 in mine, and maybe you know one of your parents have an education, and if you can be a doctor, well, by God, I can be one too. And that's how the rivalry started.
When was it?
When?
Yeah.
About my second year in high school. I remember him so well because in kindergarten, he was the only one who could tell time. And I was real jealous. If I went home, I told my mother, you got to teach me how to tell time, because Cleve already knows. And she worked on me about a week until I learned how to tell time. And that's the type of guy I was.
So you were at Stanford how long before the war broke out?
I went there in 40, and I left there in 43 to go in the service during the summer. Then at the fall, we had to take the Army Specialized Training Program test. And you had to make a certain score in order for them to return you back to the university. So luckily, the Lord blessed me, and I passed, and I returned to finish my final year at Stanford. And then I applied for medical school. I applied to Stanford, Howard, and Meharry. And I decided on Meharry because I never attended a black school before. And I wanted to see what it was like. So I went to Mahara in Nashville.
So you finished your degree before you went on active duty?
I finished my degree before I went on active duty, and I went in the service as a private first class in the Army first. And then when I passed the Army Specialized Training test, they returned us back to medical school.
Where did you take your basic training?
I really didn't ever have any basic training because when I went in Fort Riley, Kansas. And they didn't know what to do with us because we were considered specials because we had acceptances to medical school. And they didn't know exactly what to do with us, except they used to look at Cleveland and I funny. We happened to be going at the same time because we were black and we didn't have to do a lot of things other fellows did. And before they could really assign us to a basic training camp, well, our orders came through to report back to your university since you passed the Army Specialized Training Program test.
And what's the date of your enlistment?
September 42.
Were there any programs at Stanford to support the war effort?
I don't remember. I was so busy trying to keep that grade point up till I didn't. And at that time, there were only about 8 or 10 blacks on the campus, and we more or less didn't know a lot about the campus.
Did you have any trouble at Stanford being black?
No. It seems as though after they found out that I could probably stand the testing, I became a favorite of a lot of the instructors. In fact, one of the doctors in bacteriology, he took me as one of his student's assistants, and I helped him teach bacteriology at the university.
Who was the first black at Stanford?
I don't know.
There had been, before these 8 blacks, there had been other blacks before.
I'm sure there were.
Yeah. You played football at Stanford?
Yes.
You had a good team?
Oh, 6-5, 6-4, something like that. I never shall forget our quarterback. His name was Frank Alvin. He was left-handed. I remember that very well because we used to get crossed up on the handoff.
What's the best play you had at Stanford on the football team?
About a 53-yard run against Nebraska.
Score a touchdown?
A touchdown. It happened once and never happened anymore.
Now, what's the worst play you had?
Fumbling. Fumble the ball and cause them to lose the game. But we were cohesive even then as a team. Remind me a lot of OU.
Did Stanford go to the Rose Bowl anytime when you were there?
Not while I was there.
You ever postseason play while you were there?
No. You know, if I started 4 years, you know, the couldn't have a Rose Bowl team. I can remember running track at the Coliseum. It was Pac-8 then. And I remember vividly going down that bowl. In fact, my mother, when we moved to California, she lived within eyesight of the Coliseum. And you walk in, ground level, and go down. And I remember one day we were running the medley relay, and I'd had a little diarrhea, and it made me run faster because I wanted to get back to the men's room. Those are the little funny things you remember, and you sit back and laugh about it later.
So you went on active duty, what year?
Well, when you went back to university, that was considered active duty. Okay, when you went back to university.
And
So I got credit from September 1942.
And where were you for the win?
Which one? The reason why I say that is because the wars in Europe.
Okay, VJ Day first.
VJ Day was the first one, and we came back to the States. And that was in 45, I believe.
Okay, were you overseas?
I went overseas between the time that I entered medical school, before I entered medical school, went to England. And when it came time for me to come back to medical school, they flew me back from England to Nashville, which I thought was pretty good.
Would you describe traveling on a troop train? You said you went to Amarillo.
Well, I remember this particular one we had. It was just a box car with a heavy wire screen around it. And you'd get the dirt and the dust and everything else from around the railroad on that thing.
How long would you be in this boxcar?
Well, the time it took from California to North Carolina.
Now, were the troop trains segregated or just all over together?
Well, they couldn't segregate me then because we were the specialty guys that were going back to medical school.
How did the other soldiers treat you?
Novelty. No racial problems, but you when you've been black as long as I have, you know. There's a DMZ there. Even today, you can talk with a white fellow and you know where the barrier lies. You know whether this is the guy that you can trust or whether this is the guy that's really shallow. You know even today. And there's a lot of them here in Guthrie. And there's a lot of genuine people here in Guthrie too. I gotta add that too. And some people I've met since I've been in the Lions Club that I wouldn't trade for anybody of any race, color, or creed.
Tell me about going overseas. How'd you go overseas?
Well, the first time I went overseas, I was in the Air Force. See, when I went to medical school, when I finished medical school, instead of coming back into the Army, I enlisted in the Air Force. And I got an immediate commission as a first lieutenant. And let me see. That was in 48. And then they had the more or less overseas troops, what do you call the guys that come in and stay just to keep the peace until
Or the occupation?
Honor of occupation, and wasn't too much to be done at that time.
When did you go overseas first time?
Where?
Where and when?
Well, the first time I went overseas was when I went to England, and then came back to medical school. The second time was after I got recalled, rejoined the Air Force, and went to Korea.
Oh, VE Day was first, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, I'm sorry.
And then we came back here and they dropped a bomb in Japan, and a few days later,
Had they told you that you were going to invade Japan? Were you preparing for the invasion?
we were preparing for the invasion.
What were you going to do? What did they tell you were going to do?
They didn't know themselves. I guess we fill in the cracks and crevices.
So what did you do at VJ?
When it came, like everybody else, just
Celebration.
celebrated.
And describe medical school, if that's a fair question.
Medical school?
Yeah.
Easier than college, because this is the last step. When you're in high school, you're going to be a doctor. You look towards college. You look towards medical school. So you never quite look like you're finished till you get to medical school. Then you know this is the last step. So you do the best you can. It was tough. You couldn't play with it. You could flunk out at any time. And you just had to apply yourself.
What's your fondest memory of medical school?
Been in the top 10 for 4 years.
And you graduated what number?
Number 7.
Number 7.
Why does everyone remember that? And incidentally, my friend, WWII, we finally graduated together. The guy that I told you could be there, we graduated together. He finished 12th, but he was the better student. I mean, his brain was better than mine. The reason why I say that is I studied, and he half stepped, but he could still make the grade. And I always knew that, so I accepted the fact.
Is Meharry part of Vanderbilt?
No.
Or the Vinnie Second?
Yeah, and when I was there, they interchanged professors. Well, I don't know whether they interchanged or not. I know the white professors from Vanderbilt came to Meharry. Now, whether the black went to Vanderbilt, I don't know, but I know the white professors from Vanderbilt came to Meharry.
And you say you were recalled in 48?
48, right.
For the Air Force.
Mm-hmm.
How did the Air Force compare to the Army? That's a fair question.
Much better duty, I would think. Well, one thing, they didn't know what to do with me exactly because we had the air bases around, and even then it made, now see, Truman integrated the armed force in 1948 by executive order. But even then, you just don't change a person overnight. I think the wing commander wanted to get rid of me, so he had me apply for flight surgeon school down at Randolph in Texas, and I applied and was accepted and got my wings down at Randolph, along with Chuck Yeager, by the way. So every time I see Chuck Yeager on TV, he's still making money. I said, well, he's a millionaire and I'm still struggling. It must be because he's white. That's the way you think. Mm-hmm.
When did Truman desegregate the services? In 48 what month?
I'm not quite sure about the month.
Is that before or after you went in?
That was after I went in. But I can remember vividly that when he passed the executive order, Eisenhower was in England. He was head of the NATO, I think. And they told Eisenhower that Truman had desegregated the forces. And Eisenhower said, that's the biggest mistake we ever made. I wonder how many people know that. And that's why I always was a little leery of Eisenhower. I think that that's a part of his conservatism. I don't think there's anything real racial about it. He was raised, what, Abilene, Kansas? And I think that's just the way that he felt. And he was brainwashed just like I was. Brainwashed the fact that, well, white man got everything, so you got to know how to get it.
So, how long did you stay in the Air Force?
I stayed in the Air Force 26 years. I stayed in the Army 4.
Anything happened between 1948 and Korea? I guess flight school.
Flight school. I can remember that the reason why we went to Randolph because they didn't have the Air Force Academy at that time. And the Air Force Academy opened in 1951. That's when I got my wings down at Randolph, down in Texas.
And what is the difference between a normal pilot and a flight surgeon?
Flight surgeon has to be an MD. And he takes care of flying personnel only. Except in time of war, we do air evacuation of patients.
But you are a commissioned pilot.
Right. You have to learn to fly.
What do you learn to fly? What type of airplane?
T-33.
Which is that World War II type?
Mm-hmm.
And what's your fondest memory of flight school?
Fondest or the most vivid?
Oh, yes.
Well, my most vivid was the time that we were supposed to graduate. It was 27 MDs. And we had to make our parachute jump before we could get our wings. And they took us aboard a C-47 and took the door off and had us hooked up on the static line. And I was number 7 in line. And these 6 white fellows, they just went out there and jumped out at the time, you know, and I got there and I couldn't make myself jump out of there for nothing in the world. And finally, one of my friends, I'll never forget him, his name was Donald Mettler. He's a doctor up in Nebraska now. He pushed me out. And that's the first time that I really knew that you could think while you're falling. And that's the first time I really knew that you don't float down. You hit the ground between 12 and 15 miles an hour with the parachute. So that was my most vivid. Best moment was when we got our wings, because you had to really keep up. It was just another university. That's what it was. In fact, they called it Air University, and they were tough. You had to know, and you know they always took a second look at me because my face was black. I'll make sure that I knew because I had to work with flying personnel, and most of the flying personnel in those days were going to be white. They wanted to make sure that no mistakes were made.
Of course, they had the pilots from Tuskegee Institute.
Well, yeah, it was 332nd.
Yeah. Were you one of the first pilots after World War II? Black?
I don't know. I know I was the 4th black flight surgeon in the history of the U.S. Air Force. That's all I know.
Korea.
Bad. First one in Korea, well, let me see. 51. I was left on inactive duty in May. And I was gonna start a private practice. And in July, the Korean War started, and they recalled me in September.
Where were you sent when you were recalled?
You mean what part? Well, all I know about it, they call it K-47. It was an area in the hills of Korea.
South Korea?
Mm-hmm.
Northern part, southern part?
Southern, South Korea.
What were your duties in Korea? What did you do?
Air evacuation. See, now I remember of a SAC team, Strategic Air Command, and we air evacuated the wounded.
How do you perform an air evacuation?
Well, what they do, what you call triage. You go and see which ones are the most needed of medical care. You put them in a certain area, then the next, so you got them separated. Then you tend to the worst ones first, and if you got enough men, well then you try to take care of everyone you could.
And who evacuates the men from the front line?
The medics.
The medics.
Mm-hmm.
And how long were you, whenever you air evac the men, where were they being sent?
Well, most of the time we'd make a tour back to the States. So I'd get back about every 4 to 5 weeks.
And what?
Letterman in California.
And what type of airplane were you using?
C-47 transports. But most of my dudes on B-29.
Where were you when the Chinese came down?
Looking at them. I say that because when I first went there, I was afraid to go out. And I was the most cowardly soldier you ever saw, because whenever I was in a combat area, I was just afraid. But it's one thing about being afraid. You usually do what's right if you've been properly trained. And one thing I remember about the Chinese is that you'd be looking over at the hills, and I know you can say this too. You look over at the hills and you'd be trying to see something, you wouldn't see anything. And then about dawn, you start hearing a lot of horns, bugles or whatever. And you keep looking. And it looked like the whole side of the mountain would move. And they would put those mortars and things and drop mortar shells on those people, and they just kept coming. And that's how they overran so many hills. And I'm sure no man is that brave, because I was thinking how cowardly I was and how brave they appeared. So I finally figured out they were on poppy seeds.
Where was this? What part of Korea?
Near Incheon. All the way going over towards the rest of the Chinese border.
Or was this you heading up north?
Yeah.
Once has I heard about if men were wounded, any of the men left behind?
I'm sure. Because some of them were just probably out. You'd think they were dead. They'd be left. Or dead.
Now, where were you when the Chinese broke through? What part of Korea? Were you there in Incheon or they?
Yeah, MacArthur had ordered, well, he was going to go on into Red China, I think. And that's when we were on a B-29. And we got too close to the flat, and our B-29 got hit. And we finally made it back to Seoul by the hardest. And we couldn't get our landing gear down. And I was sitting there thinking, it's a heck of a place to die in Korea. And so they greased the runway with carbon dioxide foam. We bellied in, and when the plane screeched to a stop, I got over the escape hatch on the back. And I think it must be about 12 feet up there. And I hit that button and dropped out. And I ran over the personal equipment. I turned in everything I had. I said, I'm not flying anymore. So they hospitalized me with a psychiatric diagnosis of fear of flying. And I told them I didn't care. But after about 3 months off flight duty, I started missing that extra $150 that we got for flying. So I begged back on. I got back on. But I was just afraid.
How close were you to the active fight?
Oh, I was never just right there where you could see the whites of the eyes. I was close enough to hear some guns.
Is it true that if some of the wounded, they knew they weren't going to survive, so they left?
I don't know. I guess that's where MASH comes in. I don't know. I really don't know. I was so busy trying to get out of there with what people had on the ship until I don't know.
And they signed the armistice. When was that signed?
You mean when they finally demilitarized zone? I don't know.
At 54?
I think it was 54, I believe.
How long have you spent in Korea?
Well, off and on, in and out, maybe a year and a half. That's all you could take.
Were you a part of the retreat when the Chinese came across?
No. Air Force always got
Good place to be.
out. And that first one in Korea, we lost more foot soldiers by frostbite than we did by actual battle.
I ain't treat frostbite.
different ways. Then they would try to bring them gradually up to a point with snow, and then gradually increase the heat of the water. But we lost a lot of men like that with frostbitten limbs. I'm sure they're improved by now.
Do you have any fond memories of Korea?
No.
Did you go back?
I'd like to see what it's like now. Like I went back to Pearl Harbor and when was that? 83, and it was nothing like what it was when we first went through there.
When did you first go to Pearl Harbor?
A year and a half after December 7, 41. Somewhere about the early part of 43, 44, something like that.
Were they raised in Oklahoma at that time?
I don't think so.
What was the reaction of the Korean civilians to the American soldiers?
You couldn't tell, really, because you couldn't trust them. They did what they had to survive, because they just made booby trap a kid and send them in among the troops, American troops.
Was there any reaction different to you, being a black American?
Maybe. I know there was a definite reaction of the Germans against the black American. I know that.
What was their reaction, the Germans?
Superiority. Funny thing, they used me as a German interpreter because I used to speak fluent German, because during my working years as a kid, I worked for a German family, so I learned the localism. So when I went to college, I always had German in my language area. I got pretty good at it. Now I get everything. It's been 10 years since I've used it.
So you were an interpreter in Germany?
Well, when they bring German prisoners, sometimes they won't be. And the first thing they say is Schwarz, which means black. And I used to laugh, because I knew what they were saying, but they really didn't know that I really knew.
Where were you stationed in Germany at that time?
Somewhere out of Mannheim.
Just before the war ended or after?
After.
I guess this is they're still trying to get all the SS troops rounded up.
Not supposed.
Why were you interrogating, or interrogation of the German prisoners?
Sometime I was the only one doing any German in that area. And when they asked for German interpreters, when I was there for everybody started looking at each other. I'm not supposed to know German.
After Korea,
Oh, different bases. Flight circles at different bases in the States.
what rank did you achieve?
When I got out, Lieutenant Colonel.
Why did it take so long to get a black general?
You mean in what service? Because when I finished medical school, we had a black general who spoke to us, B.O. Davis. Incidentally, I knew B.O. Davis Jr. also. My brother was in Keymore Island with B.O. Davis Jr.
He was the first black general, wasn't he?
B.O., yes. And he spoke to my graduating class in 1947.
When did he get his start?
Probably about 45. I think he was on the, brigadier. I think that's on his G. But his son became, what, a 4-star
Yeah,
general?
there was one force. In fact, He was commanding general of Fort Hood. He made 3-star. When did you retire from the Air Force?
Actually retired was in '72. I released to active reserve in '68.
You go to Vietnam?
Yeah, evacuation duty only.
What was
Never. Thailand, outside of Thailand. Never actually in the combat areas, thank God.
I spent 19 months over
I know those first guys that went in as training the Vietnam soldiers to fight. What were they called?
there. The advisors?
The advisors. I know 90% of the advisors never came home. I know that. Because I tell you, they have so many ways of killing you in Vietnam. And you'd be watching everywhere you step.
I flew helicopters over there. So I was flying above most of that.
You know, with the gunships. That was bad duty.
What'd you do after you retired? From the military.
Decided I wasn't going to work anymore. Played golf. Diddled around. Finally got bored. Because every time I go play golf with guys my age I played golf with, they had to work. So that's when I decided to come on down to, well, I joined the VA first. I stayed with them about a year. And it was boring, and then I didn't like the type of medicine VA practice. So I came to Job Corps,
And where do you live when you retired?
St. Louis.
St. Louis.
Mm-hmm.
And why did you join Job Corps?
Well, it was an opportunity to get out of St. Louis.
And why were you sent to Guthrie?
This is where one of the best centers was.
So you requested Guthrie?
Right. Mm-hmm. And it's still one of the best centers. Guthrie got this one.
How was the Job Corps program organized?
Through the Department of Labor. Just to help disadvantaged kids that couldn't make it in school.
Now the place out here, the lack of a better term, the camp out here.
Mm-hmm.
Is that a proper term?
Center.
The Job Corps Center.
Mm-hmm.
Camp's not a good term.
You'd be surprised what a boon it's been to the underprivileged.
Now is there one man in charge of the center?
Right. One person. Because a woman center director now.
Okay. And the chain of command out there, how's that organized in the center?
Well, they have one person over the center director that directly connects with the Department of Labor, and then the center director. And then at that time, I was third as the physician for the Job Corps Center, and then on down the line.
What were your duties?
Just taking care of the sick kids and making referrals and so forth.
Now, do the kids actually board out there? They live?
They actually board out there. Now they do have some that live in the cities that commute, but at that time they all stayed on the center. And it was a girl center at that time, but since then it's become co-educational. And now I understand they're going back to either girl or boy, sometime or other. But right now it's co-ed, boys and girls.
What's the criteria for being accepted in the Job Corps?
Just want to come, I guess. I don't think it's anything real shaky.
And how do you select the?
I think you have to be in a certain income bracket too.
And how long did you work at Job Corps?
68 to 71.
71. Didn't what to do.
Well, I quit Job Corps because I was working out there, and then Langston University hired me, and then I opened an office in Guthrie, so I had 3 places, and I couldn't make them all, so I quit Job Corps. I made the least money in Job Corps.
So you kept your office at Langston and Guthrie,
Yeah, right,
and you set up your practice in Guthrie,
in Guthrie.
and you still go to Langston?
Mm-hmm.
And do you teach at Langston?
Sometimes I'm supposed to teach this fall. I teach anatomy to the nursing students.
Do you have any questions? Anything else like that? Yeah, okay.
Ask anything you want.
It was 16.
Not hardly. Probably about 45.
All through the years that, when you were a child till now, do you feel that it was your hardship when you've seen your mother and father go through hardships with 10 children trying to raise them, that gave you the push to continue on?
Well, my mother finished the 7th grade. My father finished the 4th grade. And here they are with 10 kids. And so naturally my dad had to do something else, so he had this whiskey still he ran at night and worked during the day. And he used to tell me, he said, the reason why I'm doing this, I want you kids to get an education, so you want to do the same thing. And that was his thrust, education. Why, I don't know, but I was glad that it happened like that. Because we were always taught to work. I got my first job when I was 11 years old. And I worked for $3 a week at a drugstore. And I bought money, I bought things with it. And I graduated to a nightclub in high school. I used to cook for a nightclub. They paid me $22.70 a week. I was rich. And that's how I learned to cook. But it's been worthwhile. I think that your parents have a lot to do with what happens to you. Because they always stress education. But my dad was never arrested for making whiskey because every Sunday morning, the police chief in Wichita would come to our house and get his cut. Every Sunday morning, he never missed. I didn't know what they were doing at the time, but after I got older, well, my dad told me what it was.
Did your dad deliver the whiskey or people come to the house to get it?
Both.
How did he deliver it?
Well, he had a Model T Ford, which he couldn't back up. Funny thing is, when he first got it, well, he used to have to drive around the block and hit it toward his workplace because he didn't know how to back up on it. But he delivered a lot of whiskey in that Model T Ford.
What would he do to try to hide the fact he was delivering whiskey? Or did he hide the fact?
He didn't hide it.
Was it in jars?
Jars, fruit jars. And it would be, the white lightning would be clear, but if they wanted colored, he would color it with burnt sugar. And that's what gave the whiskey the color. Did you know that?
No.
I didn't either until then.
Where is this still located?
Well, out in the woods. A lot of wooded areas in Wichita at that time.
A lot of moonshiners?
A lot of moonshiners.
Did Dad make the best moonshine?
I don't know. You know, funny thing is, you know, I don't drink today. I don't even drink beer. And never did. And I think it's because the method of making whiskey could be real dirty. As far as I'm concerned, it wasn't anything sanitary about it.
Well, I think we have a good interview.
Okay.
So, thank you.
All right.
Now, you're a 33rd degree Mason.
Right.
And where and when did you first join the lodge?
I first joined the lodge in 1948
Where?
in Tennessee. Remember the Blue Lodge? Thought that was the only thing going. I never aspired to do anything else. I was in the Blue Lodge, in which we got so good we did it without books. And in 1970, I got a job corps, and I met one of the great Masons here in the state of Oklahoma, Leroy Green. And he invited me to come and join the lodge here in Oklahoma. And that was in 1970. And I got my 32nd degree in 1971 in May. And in, let's see, October the 7th, 1971, I got my 33rd degree in Atlanta, Georgia.
What's the criteria for a 33rd degree?
You gotta know, and it's more or less an honorary degree. You gotta have some type of significant achievement so that you can impart a lot of the Masonry to other people. You gotta show that you're a real practicing Mason.
Are the Masons still segregated?
The Masons are still segregated. In fact, it's a funny thing. We use the same books. We use the same regalia. We use the same rings. We use the same caps, same robes, same procedures, but it's been segregated since 1779, when Prince Hall sit around the table. He got the permission to form a lodge of Masons from Scotland. But the Masons are still segregated. In fact, the black Masons are considered clandestine by the white Masons because we don't belong to the same order.
Can a white man join a black lodge?
I'm sure you can. Some black men you can't tell whether they're white or not. See, I'm sure you can. We have black people in my fraternity. I mean, white people in my fraternity.
Because my lodge is in Barlow 284.
Mm-hmm.
And you see the signs is AF and AM. But I've seen the sign F and AM.
Right.
Is this because you're not considered ancient free or what? That's what I've been told. Is that true?
I suppose we have F and AM, right? You have AF and AM. That's what I've been told. But I've been doing a lot of research. I'm commander-in-chief this year for the consistory. And I'm doing some research into it. Now, I got a lot of quotation marks, friends among the white here in Guthrie that are Masons that would like to see we become one organization. But no one wants to break the ice because they don't know how powerful Gaylord is. He might kick them out of Masonry altogether if they do it. So within my lifetime, we'll never be a part of the white.
I asked a question one time about trouble courts.
Mm-hmm. I know.
I asked, they said, well, the blacks aren't ancient free, they were slaves. And I said, except blacks were never slaves.
That's true.
Now they came down and they said, you don't ask questions like that. That's just the way it is.
That's true. That's just the way it is. It's one of those unwritten things. It's just like the Lions organization. If there's nothing in the Lions Club that says you can't admit black, but we were kept out until 1973 when we formed the organization in Langston. And because you have to be what? You have to be invited. And the man that helped us form our club, he has always been looked at more or less as a rebel among his own white friends. He's kind of lived it down now, but without him, we would not have existed today as a Lions Club.
Do you have your separate building?
And what? Yes, we do.
Now, do you use this consistory up here?
No, we don't. We have a consistory building.
Where's it located?
Second and Harrison? Yeah, Second and Harrison. Pollard Funeral Home, and we have the building on the side upstairs. You know, large has to be what? Upstairs.
Maybe someday.
We have a very, very, very well renovated place now too. It looks good.
Do you own the building?
Yes, we own the building. We own Pollard's Funeral Home building.
Thank you again.
All right.